In my world, survival was a quiet art. The land itself was a dangerous patchwork of fear and silence. So people learned to become ghosts, to vanish into places that didn't want to be found. My community, hundreds of us, lived inside a vast forgotten house, tucked away deep in a forest. It was a labyrinth of too many rooms and staircases that twisted into shadow. No one really knew everyone. We organized ourselves into smaller groups, families forged by mead rather than blood. My group had 15 of us. We shared meals, stood watch through the long nights, and whispered stories to keep the darkness at bay. We thought we were safe. We were wrong. One of us died. It happened without a sound, without a warning. One day he was there, laughing and sharing a meal. The next, he was just gone. People didn't just die in our groups. Not like that. His absence was a tear in the fabric of our little family, a silence that no one knew how to fill. But I did. I knew about the veil. It was a thin place between worlds, where trees looked solid but weren't, and the air shimmered as if it had forgotten which universe it belonged to. I'd stumbled upon it once, years ago, hidden at the end of a narrow, overgrown track, so I volunteered. I would cross it. The path to the veil was a journey into deeper shadow. It wound through the thickest part of the forest, narrowing until the branches overhead formed a tunnel, and spiders. Spiders covered everything. They clung to the bark of trees, they spun thick webs that brushed against my face, and they crawled over the ground in living, shifting patterns, but they didn't frighten me. In my world, spiders were just a part of life, like the rain or the wind. I walked through them without a second thought. When I stepped through the veil, the forest dissolved. I found myself in a world that felt colder, sharper. Earth. I found him there, living alone in a small apartment. He was trapped in a life that seemed dim and hollow, moving through his days like he was already fading away. When I told him where I came from, he laughed. But then, as I spoke, he started to listen. And when I told him that in my world he had died, his face went pale. "You belong with us," I told him. "You were missed." Getting him back was another story. The spider tunnel terrified him. He stood at the edge of the veil, shaking his head. "There are too many," he whispered, his voice trembling. I took his hand. "Where I come from, this is normal. They won't hurt you." He looked into my eyes and he trusted me. We crossed back over together, his hand gripping mine. When we emerged, my people were waiting. They didn't know this man, not this version of him, but they recognized him all the same. They welcomed him as if he'd just been gone for a little while. The hole he'd left behind was filled, and for a time our house, our home, felt whole again. Then the attack came. It struck in the dead of night, a storm of shouting and crashing walls. Shadows, dark and hungry, poured through the corridors. I scrambled into the roof space, my hands scraped raw as I pulled myself up into the rafters. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure it would give us away. Below me, I saw him, desperately searching for a place to hide. I reached down and hauled him up into the darkness with me. We lay there, side by side, breathing as softly as we could, listening to the sounds of our only home being torn apart. When the noise finally faded into a terrible silence, we knew the house was no longer safe. So we chose the veil again. But this time, it wasn't for a rescue. This time it was to escape. Earth became our refuge. We found a small apartment in a city that seemed perpetually washed in rain and gray light. The tall buildings pressed in on all sides, and we learned to live like shadows once more. We avoided questions. We avoided attention. We learned about each other in whispered conversations and quiet shared meals. And somewhere in that space between fear and survival, love began to grow. Then, our child was born. A child of two worlds. When they cried, things would happen. Objects would gently lift from the floor. Toys would slide across the room on their own. The light seemed to bend and warp strangely around their small, perfect hands. At only 16 months old, our child carried something ancient and powerful inside them. And that was when the blackbirds appeared. They began circling the city, silent and watchful. Their feathers were an unnatural black, marked with strange patterns that looked like symbols written in the sky. They weren't ordinary birds. They were watchers, sent by something from my world, hunting for what did not belong. We locked our doors, we kept the curtains drawn tight. We held our breath, but one day, the baby opened the door. Just a crack. A single bird flew inside. We froze. My heart stopped. We couldn't let it leave. If it escaped, it would tell the others where to find us. My first instinct was to kill it, but I couldn't move. The bird just tilted its head, studying us with eyes that seemed older than time itself. It waited, patient and knowing. For what felt like hours, none of us moved. Then our child reached out, not with their hands, but with their mind. The bird went completely still, its wings folded gently against its body. The strange, unsettling patterns on its feathers faded away, and it became just a bird again. Ordinary, small, it hopped over to the window and waited. I slowly walked over and opened the glass. The bird flew out into the sky and disappeared. It did not return. That night, for the first time in months, the city grew quiet. The circling shapes were gone from the clouds. The watchers never came again. We stayed in that small apartment. We raised a child who belonged to more than one sky. We taught them to hide their gifts, to live gently in a world that would never understand. And sometimes when the streets were silent and still, I would think of the veil in the forest, the tunnel of spiders, the house with too many rooms, and the people who had once waited for us there. We learned something between those two worlds. We learned that some beings are not meant to be hunted. Some children are born to bridge the gap between what should never touch. And sometimes love is the only place left that's safe enough to live. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing for more. See you next time.